Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are attending the meetings, the webinar, and welcome to Biomass Canada Cluster webinar series. My name is Mahmoud Abadian. I'm a research associate at the University of British Columbia. I work with Biomass and Bioenergy Research Group, as well as Forest Product Biotechnology Research Group at the UBC in Vancouver, Canada. And I'm very glad that you attended the meeting today. And I'm very pleased that we have a group of presenters today. They are recognized leader and also a very passionate advocate for the commercial production and use of dedicated biomass crops, specifically switchgrass and miscanthus. So I'm sure we are going to have a lot of good discussion today, and we are going to talk about the recent progress and advancement they have made in switchgrass and miscanthus value chains in North America and also the European Union. Before I introduce the presenters, I would like to just say a few words about Biomass Canada cluster. The cluster was established in 2018 and is led by the Biofuel Net Canada network. Biofuel Net Canada network is a network of universities, government, and also industry. They are working together to advance the production and use of low carbon bioenergy and biofuels in Canada. And they, as I mentioned, they are leading the cluster. And I should also mention that the cluster has been supported financially by Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada's Agri-Science program. And also we have contribution from industrial partners for different projects that we have in Biomass Canada cluster. The primary goal of Biomass Canada cluster is enhance the contribution of Canadian agriculture into the growing Canadian bioeconomy. And in order to do that, we have 10 projects or 10 activities inside cluster. And all of these activities, projects, they are working together to improve and also develop technologies for production, processing, and also distributing agricultural biomass as a feedstock for low carbon bioeconomy, biofuels, and also bio-based products. If you are interested to learn more about Biomass Canada cluster, I encourage you to go to the website. We have information about Biomass Canada, also different projects. And also, I should mention that we had a webinar series from December 2020 to March 2021. And each of the leader of the projects, they actually presented the project and the progress they have made. So if you're interested to learn more about this project, please go to the webinar page and you can find the recording and also the presentation slide for different projects. Also, I should mention that 1 month ago, we had a webinar with some of our colleagues in the European Union. And the focus of that webinar was the use of agricultural biomass for bioheat and also biopowered production. So if you're interested to learn more about the potential use of agricultural biomass for bioheat and biopower, you can again find the presentation slide and also the recording of that webinar. So, before I introduce the speaker, I just want to go through a few housekeeping items. So this webinar is being recorded, and a copy of the recording and a slide will be posted on Biomass Canada website on the webinar page. In the Zoom platform, you see two boxes, Q&A box, also the chat box. Please type your question into the Q&A box, not chat box. So that makes the job easier for me and also for the panelists to address your question. And I usually encourage the attendees, the participants, if they want, they can actually type your name and also affiliation in the chat box. So at least we have a sort of the social interaction in this platform. Okay, so in terms of the agenda, we are going to have 4 presentations by each presenter for about 15 minutes, and we try to address 1 or 2 questions at the end of each presentation. And then we are going to have about 20-25 minutes at the end of the webinar. And then we are going to address the rest of the questions that we haven't been able to answer during the presentation. So it's my great pleasure to introduce the first speaker. He's actually joining us from Stuttgart, Germany. So instead of actually watching the Euro Cup 2021 soccer match, he decided to actually spend some time with us tonight. Actually, that's its evening time. So thank you very much, Andreas, for joining us today. Dr. Andreas Kiesel, he's a scientist at the Department of Bio-Based Product in the Bioeconomy at the University of Hohenheim in Germany. Besides teaching in the area of agronomy, bioeconomy, and life cycle assessment, Andreas is actively involved in development, project management, and execution of research projects. His research is related to crop production and agronomy of perennial crops, mainly miscanthus, and development and assessment of biomass utilization options. He's currently coordinating a big project actually in Europe. It's called the EU BBI demonstration project, GRACE, and he's going to actually talk about this project today. And also he's contributing to another project. It's called the FACCE Surplus project, or shortly Ms. Kumar Plus, in the EU Aeronet Kaufund system. If you're interested about both of these projects, you can actually find them on the Google, and you can find more information about this project, and different companies are actually involved in both of the projects. So with that, I give the floor to Andreas, and we are looking forward to listen to your presentation. Andreas, please take it away.
Thank you. Yeah, I need the screen share. So is it working? Can you see my screen?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, yeah, thanks for the kind introduction, Mahmoud, and thanks for inviting me to this interesting webinar. As Mahmoud explained, I will report some latest approaches of the BBI project, GRACE, which I'm coordinating. So maybe a few words, because I think most of you maybe do not know it. What is the GRACE project at all? So BBI, so it's a BBI demonstration project. So BBI means it's the Bio-Based Industries Joint Undertaking, which is a joint venture of the EU and the Bio-Based Industries Consortium for funding projects of various scales in the bio-based industry area. The GRACE project is, as I said, coordinated by University of Hohenheim, actually by me. And in this project, we have 21 partners, and I just put the logos here on the screen so that you can see it. So we have several several universities active in the agricultural and bioeconomy area. We have some big companies and lots of smaller companies and SMEs, but also farmers and farmers organizations, and the Italian cluster on bioeconomy Spring, which is mainly responsible also for dissemination. It's quite a big project, so we have a total budget of 15 million euro, and we receive about 12.3 million euro funding via the BBI. So half of it is EU money, and the other half is big money, so industry money. So that is the idea of this research joint venture. Rather long project, so it lasts 5 years because we're working with annual crop miscanthus, which requires quite some years to ramp up the productivity. So we are still running a few more months until May 2022. But due to COVID restrictions, we will extend the project end a little bit. As I said, we're working with miscanthus and hemp, but today I will focus more on the miscanthus side. So what are the objectives of the GRACE project? The main objective is to demonstrate various bio-based value chains at an industry relevant scale. So we are starting with, for this demonstration, we are starting with biomass cultivation on the field. We are mainly focusing on contaminated, abandoned or low productive lands. And then we demonstrate the whole value chain through until the final product. And in the end, we are looking at 10 different value chains. And a large part of those 10 different value chains is about miscanthus, or is using miscanthus biomass. I also put again the company logos just after the each demonstration or each value chain, so that you can see who is responsible for it. But I will go into that into detail a little bit later. Sorry. So for the GRACE project, as I said, we're starting with some research also on the field and with some demonstration activities. So we have different scales of trials in the project. Plot scale trials, which are more the scientific ones, which are also used for feedback to the breeders how well their new varieties are performing, and then we demonstrate also the upscaling in field scale and commercial scale trials, while commercial scale trials are mainly used for biomass production for different biomass end use cases. Plot scale trials we have established at 9 locations across Europe, and we are testing 12 novel seed-based miscanthus hybrids alongside Miscanthus giganteus, which is the standard, and a novel giganteus alike clonal propagated genotype or hybrid. In total, we've established about 60 hectares of new miscanthus fields, and as you can see in the back on the photos, we are using a novel establishment method for the plantlets by putting a biodegradable film on the new planted plantlets, and about 20 hectares of those 60 hectares in total are using a novel biodegradable, fully biodegradable film compared to the oxidegradable standard film, which we used before. So a few words about planting of our new seed-based plantlets and improvements in those systems. So this is where we started from, like planting of plantlets using a vegetable planter and covering it later on by this degradable standard polyethylene film, which is oxidegradable, so it degrades with sunlight. And after a few weeks, we have quite a nice crop. So this film is really well-proven technology, meanwhile, for miscanthus establishment from our point of view, because we increase the soil humidity, the soil temperature, and reduce frost damage in the very early stage, and enhance the early growth. So we have a much higher establishment rate and more homogeneous establishment if we use such film technology. And throughout the project, several improvements have happened. At the moment, this is the latest status of film covering technology, let's say. So we are using this one row covering machine, which is less risky for failure, because yeah, in this case, wind is always an issue with such a machine, not anymore. We were also looking at plantlet quality, and this is how the plantlets looked like when we started. So they were quite young. So meanwhile, they're growing a little bit longer in the greenhouse, so that they are better rooted and let's say more resilient and establish much better. So also this has happened, let's say, or was improved during the course of or influenced by learnings during the project. So our trial sites are located all across Europe. So we're covering a quite wide range of different climates, from more northern locations until down to very southern locations in the Po Valley in Italy, which have all different kinds of let's say, limitations. But I will not go into detail about that. A few impressions from our trial sites, so how they look like at the moment. So you can see these are drone photos taken in autumn last year or early winter last year. So you can see the quite different or nice differences between the different hybrids. So you see some of them are staying quite green, others are ripening faster, which then also results in a different quality and a different, often in a different moisture content at final harvest, and often impacts also the used harvest machinery or methods. Oh, I didn't want to show that one, so let's go to the next one. So this spring we had the first full, let's say, full yield for some locations. I have to say, we expected for most of the locations, especially in more central and northern Europe, a little bit higher yield in the third year. So more in the direction of, let's say, 20 tons. But in 2018, when we established the crop, we had very, very dry conditions. And therefore the establishment was rather slow. So that's why we think we will achieve a higher yield next year, but we have to wait for that. For the time being, it's quite promising that at most locations, the novel hybrids perform comparable, or sometimes, like here in Italy, even better than Giganteus, which is our, let's say, standard and comparison. And we see two main differences. It seems like the Sax-Syn, so Sarifloes sinensis hybrids, the yellow ones, are better suitable for more the southern locations. And it seems like the sinensis is better suitable for the northern locations. And in Germany, it seems like Giganteus is still very, very competitive. A few impressions about the applied harvest methods in our project. So you can see from direct chipping of standing crop to chipping of swathed crop, swathing and baling of the swath, all depending on what you're going to do with the biomass later on. So if you need chips later on, then you better go for direct chipping. Especially if you need a high chipping quality. If you need to transport it a longer distance or just burn it later on, then baling is often a well-suited technology. We also tested a quite novel harvest technology. This is a mobile pellet press, which produces directly on the field pellets, which work quite well, but is, let's say, rather slow compared to a normal field chopper, which is quite clear because this machinery doesn't only cut and chip the biomass, it's also pressing it and milling it before and then pressing it into pellets. So that takes much more time and much more energy. So the working speed is a little bit reduced by that. So let's have a quick look at the biomass value chains. So you can see we have some We have very different value chains, and the main routes are, let's say, chemicals, composites, and building materials. And I will go into detail a little bit about that for the Miscanthus value chains. So one of our value chain or one of our chemical value chains is Miscanthus for bioethanol production. So this demonstration case takes place in Italy, and the demonstration has been successfully performed. So they harvested like 30 tons of Miscanthus, and it was processed in Clariant's pre-commercial demo plant in Straubing, and there was quite a nice yield for bioethanol with some optimization potential, because so far they are mainly working with wheat straw over there. But they are quite sure that they can improve the technology and achieve similar yield than for ethanol yield than for wheat straw. So our partner INA in Croatia is working on upscaling this further and is planning a full-scale bioethanol plant in the next couple of years in the Sisak region, where they have an old biorefinery. And the main advantage of Miscanthus for them is the feedstock security, because the farmers are interested to have long-term contracts, while with straw they are not so interested to have 10 or 15-year contracts, to have more freedom to choose whatever they want to grow in the next year. And another very, very important advantage of Miscanthus is the rather low greenhouse gas emissions during the production of the bioethanol. And after the bioethanol production, the CO2 can be separated or can be injected into expired oil wells, and including this CO2 sequestration. So it's a so-called BECCS approach. You can achieve even a CO2 negative bioethanol fuel, which is quite important for the mineral oil companies, because there is some EU policy in place, namely the RED II directive, which maybe will be changed in the next couple of years again, and will be more strict then, which forces them to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. So that is quite promising market for those mineral oil companies. Other chemical applications in our project is HMF and phenols. So we have a pilot plant built at our university, which is meanwhile running and is producing HMF from Miscanthus biomass. So first, Miscanthus, the cellulose and hemicellulose is hydrolyzed into sugars, and then the sugars are converted into HMF, and then you can use the HMF for multiple products. I showed here a figure which shows what different kinds of products can be produced out of HMF. One very prominent is PEF, which can be used to replace PET for example, plastic bottles, and has an improved barrier function compared to PET. But the other very promising and interesting utilization is to combine it again with the phenols and to produce resins, which can then replace formaldehyde, which is a chemical which is used in the furniture industry, and there are strict regulations for formaldehyde in place, and they will be more strict in the next years. That's already announced. So the industry needs alternatives for formaldehyde, and HMF or HMF-based resins could be a quite interesting opportunity for them. The other chemical value chain is producing biobutanediol from second generation sugars produced from Miscanthus biomass. So it's a E. coli microorganism which is converting the sugars into butanediol, and the butanediol can be polymerized into biodegradable polymers for different applications. So it's biodegradable in soil, and that makes it quite interesting and quite promising for agricultural applications like such pots. In this case, it's a composite material of the polymer and hemp fibers, or like such clear or black films for mulch applications. And this is, I told you before, this is the film which is used to replace the standard Samco film. So this one is the standard polyethylene oxidogradable film, and these two are the bio-based butanediol mulch films, which are 100% biodegradable in soil. So this is a very good development, because the Samco film is quite risky, that it breaks down into microplastic, which is then remaining in the soil, and which is obviously not wanted. Another very recent development is in the composite market. So in this case, miscanthus is fractionated into fibers and added to a conventional polypropylene polymer. And our partner Adiplast has meanwhile launched a bio-based polypropylene composite material, which is meanwhile also listed in the Car Automotive Panel 2021. So that is quite interesting for the automotive sector to decrease also their carbon footprint by increasing the let's say the share of bio-based materials in their cars. And the next step for them will be to develop the same material using recycled polypropylene to further increase or decrease the environmental impact. And the aim for them, since now it's listed to have 1 or 2 car models in the next year equipped with this novel composite material, and further improve it during the remaining project duration. Another also very interesting application is in the building sector. So our partner Mocu, they are producing mycelium-based sound absorption panels. So it is pure miscanthus or hemp biomass, which is inoculated with a fungi, mycelium fungi, and the mycelium fungi is growing on the biomass and producing such a white foamy material. And after it colonized the whole biomass, it's stopped and killed by sterilization, and then you can use it to produce such sound absorption panels, which are used then in interior design. And quite interesting because they are 100% bio-based, they are lightweight, they have a very high sound absorption capacity, and they're completely chemical free. So that is very, very interesting and very growing market in Italy. A few more slides, then I'm finishing. So another building application is in the concrete sector. So miscanthus in this case is used as an additive to concrete to reduce the weight of the concrete. So the partner Miscanthus Group has already a partner in place in Holland, which is selling this meanwhile as a product. The so-called Structon Green Silence Wall is available in the Netherlands. And they are also working on 2 other segments, selling miscanthus for concrete application in pavements and lightweight bricks. In Netherlands, it's quite a promising and interesting market because there is some national regulation in place to reduce the environmental impact of the building sector, and this causes strong interest from the building companies to increase the share of bio-based materials. And Miscanthus Group developed miscanthus as such an additive to concrete, which is not easy because if you simply throw miscanthus into the concrete around the miscanthus particle is drying out too fast, and there is not enough polymerization, and then you have too little stability. So this is not wanted. So there are some, let's say, some secrets behind. So this is my last slide. I think so far from the project, we have achieved quite some nice biomass, or demonstrated quite some nice biomass utilization options. Overall, you can say there are two different principal ways of the biomass utilization. First one is the conversion into chemicals, for example, bioethanol, HMF, butanediol. They generally use the whole biomass to convert it into the chemicals, because the biomass quality is less an issue for such applications, because you apply quite heavy pre-treatments and slight difference in lignin content, like you can find them in the different hybrids, are less important. The other way is the direct material use, like I have shown also in the last couple of slides. And for this application, it shows that it's always, or it's quite often, very advantageous to use specific fractions for the direct material use. So fractionation is the key to improve and optimize that direct material use. And one of our partners in the project has built within the project a fractionation unit. This is shown here during the building and after finishing it. This is very, very helpful unit to standardize the miscanthus biomass into fiber fractions, which always have the same characteristics and help and support the industrial application later on. The challenge with this unit is you have to find a market for each fraction, because you're generally producing more than one fraction, and you need to find a profitable market for each of them to overall have an economic business case, let's say. And with that, I want to close my presentation and happy to answer your questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Andreas. Very interesting presentation, and also the GRACE project, especially that we are looking at different potential pathway to use miscanthus for different application in the bioeconomy. So very interesting. We have 4 questions, I guess, but we only have time for 1. And I see that 2 of the questions are related to greenhouse gas emission, like mitigation potential using miscanthus in different value chain. So we have a question that are there carbon footprints available for these value chains? Because you mentioned about different pathways. And if so, can this information be shared with the participants?
Yes, so we have carbon, let's say carbon footprint is a different analysis, but what we do in the project is we perform life cycle assessment for each value chain. We have done that so far for each of them, but we are still working to improve them. So the idea of the project is not only make a life cycle assessment and identify or just show how much emissions you have per kilogram of product or per megajoule of energy or whatnot. The idea is to now look in detail into it and study where are the hotspots, where can things be improved, and go back to the industrial partner and work with them on improving them. So this is what is going on at the moment. So it's not yet, it's partly published. Some of them are published, or at least one, the bioethanol the bioethanol life cycle assessment is published. And I can send you the paper. I will just post it in the DOI or the link in the chat. But the other ones are not yet published, but hopefully will be published in the next couple of months.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, thanks, Andreas. I guess we leave the rest of the question at the end of the presentation. And of course, if you have time, you can actually answer the question in the Q&A box. Thank you very much. Now
sure,
let's
I will do so. Thank you.
Yeah,
bye-bye.
Thanks. Thank you, Andreas. Okay, now we move from actually Stuttgart, Germany to Vonore in Tennessee, USA. The next presenter is Dr. Sam Jackson. He's the Vice President of Business Development in General Incorporation. As I mentioned, they are based in Vonore, Tennessee, USA. Sam leads business development, including sales, marketing, and public relations at General Incorporation. His career has focused on developing sustainable, practical, and economical biomass solutions for a variety of products. He earned a PhD in natural resources from the University of Tennessee. Thank you, Sam, again for joining us, and we are looking forward to listening to your presentation. Please take it away.
Okay, so does that show up correct, Mahmoud?
Yeah, great, thanks.
Excellent. So as he said, my name is Sam Jackson. I'm based here in Eastern Tennessee and have been working with these types of biomass crops for a number of years now. I don't care to admit how many now that I've been at this. So it's a pleasure to be here to talk to you and to hear the other presentations and some of the exciting things that are going on in the space. So, I think what you heard just in Andreas's presentation was very, very exciting, looking at all the different avenues that that research group is looking at for the use of miscanthus and other biomass. So we're going to kind of shift gears with my presentation, and I'm going to focus just a little bit more on a specific application and a specific route that our business is now taking as we move forward with biomass here in the US. So to give you a little bit of background on Genera, we were founded back in 2008 and spent a number of our early years of growth focused on supplying biomass to the growing biofuels and bio products industries here in the US. We were predominantly a supplier. So we did everything upstream of the plant gate, working with landowners, contracting with growers, helping manage crops, collecting, doing logistics and storage, as well as pre-processing of that material. And as our company grew, we grew in expertise with different folks on our staff and had a lot more focus on manufacturing. So in about 2016, we made a decision to really focus on becoming downstream integrated with our own manufacturing capacity in addition to the supply chain work that we were doing at the time. And so after some significant R&D and validation of different technologies, we have moved very far forward now into manufacturing agricultural fiber products. We really focus on all of the different wide applications of agricultural materials in the fiber marketplace, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So we have built our first ag pulping mill, for lack of a better term, here in Eastern Tennessee, and it's in operation today. And we look forward to continuing to grow that facility as well as grow our footprint in other locations in the US. And so what we have really truly focused on is connecting our agricultural crop expertise with perennial herbaceous crops and other feedstocks to the demand by the consuming audience for sustainable products, and really focused on food service, food packaging, and other consumable items that agricultural fibers provide a much more sustainable footprint than existing products today. And so what I'm going to do as we go through, we'll talk a little bit about what we're doing here and then about some of those markets that we're in and really wind up with some sustainability information there. So when we think about the products that can come from agricultural fibers, there's really a broad array of things. We've always said that pretty much anything made from oil can also be made from biomass, and that's true. So while we have done work in biochemicals and biopower and biofuels and other things, what we focus on today is the use of the pulp or the fiber, the usable fiber and its byproducts out of these biomass crops. So our primary markets today for the fiber that we work with are paper towel and tissue applications, as well as printing and writing paper. We do a lot of work in food service disposables, as you'll see, food packaging. We also work in binders and agglomeration products with our co-product, and really have been impressed with, one, the consumer demand for agricultural products, but also, two, the wide array of applications that we've identified for these materials. The circles on the slide there without the check marks are other markets that we're investigating today that we've got trials in or that we're doing R&D in for these fibers. But you can see it's a huge wide array of applications, as I said, ranging from food service all the way through medical disposables, pharmaceutical packaging, high-end consumer packaging. It's been a pretty interesting approach to see what companies are interested in these fiber products. So here in East Tennessee, what Genera has done and how we operate is we work with local, regional, and other farmer production groups, whether it's a single individual farm or other groups that are growing significant amount of biomass. Obviously, logistics play a role, so we want that biomass as close to our facility as possible. But we look at all opportunities. And so we do haul biomass from out of state. from other locations, but we bring in that biomass to our facility for processing. I'll talk a little bit more in just a moment about how our supply chain works and what those relationships with the growers and the farmers look like. But we really focus on being a fully integrated facility in that we bring baled material into our facility, we process it, and we send finished goods back out. So in the marketplace that we're in, we're the largest facility in North America that makes the types of fiber products that we do that is fully integrated in that way. So on the second line of the chart there on the slide, we bring our biomass in, we debale it, we sort of coarse grind it or fluff it, if you will. We don't want to go to a very fine particle size. And we run that through a proprietary ag pulping process. This non-wood pulping process is very much designed for herbaceous materials and for the separation of lignin from the cellulose and other components of the plant in that process. It could not run wood. It is a very distinctly different process. For those of you that have been around craft wood pulping in the past, this is really nothing like this. This is more mechanical in nature, although we do have some proprietary chemistry, and that gives us some advantages over traditional fiber sources from a sustainability perspective, as also from being a good neighbor. We all know what a pulp mill smells like as you drive by it on the highway, and our particular process here doesn't have those issues. So through our licensed process, we create a usable fiber, a pulp, if you will. In our facility, we use that pulp in two different ways. The first is we actually sell wet lap pulp into the market, and that's where we go to the tissue and towel market, packaging board, things of that nature. So we can produce our pulp in that way. And then we also have an in-house thermoforming operation. That's where in-house we make compostable, biodegradable food service products. Think plates, bowls, takeout containers, trays, those kinds of things. So we have that in-house here. So not only can we sell market fiber, but we can also sell a finished good to consumers. And we're selling into restaurant chains, institutional applications, consumer markets. There's a wide array of places that our fiber plates or takeout containers will wind up. And then we have a third product line that we sell out of our facility, which is what we call a co-product syrup. So basically it is the lignin and the other inorganics that come out of the process. And that's where we go into some binders and some agglomeration markets with that lignin co-product. Again, it's quite a bit different than the liquor that might come out of a lignosulfonate or a lignosulfonate liquor that might come out of a craft mill. It's quite a bit of a different chemistry, but it does have lignin in it and shares some of those same properties. So those are the three primary markets that we have. And again, down at the bottom, you can kind of see some of the formats that our products are going into. When we focus on feedstocks, we like to tell folks that we are feedstock agnostic. That's probably not totally true. We all want to focus on and have some consistency in our feedstock supply chain. But really, our technology does give us flexibility to move in and out of some different feedstocks. Our primary feedstocks at this facility are both switchgrass and miscanthus. Those are the two top materials that we use, make up the most of the volume that we run through our plant. But we also do use a small component of wheat straw as it's regionally available, as well as biomass sorghum. The switchgrass and miscanthus obviously give you lots of benefit from high yields, perennial disease, and drought resistance. Biomass sorghum actually provides us with an annual crop to fit into some different agricultural rotations. But those top four feedstocks there on the slide are the ones that we focus on in our facility. We can switch in and out of feedstocks, we can campaign feedstocks, and we can also blend our fibers as well at the facility. So it gives us a lot of flexibility. All of those feedstocks produce a relatively similar fiber. So it's not like we're producing different grades of fiber. They all work hand in hand together. We've also looked at some other feedstocks as well, triticale being one as a winter cover crop. That's pretty common in our region. We've done a good bit of work with industrial hemp, trying to get at that long fiber for biomass. And then we've also dealt with some other things like energy cane in certain parts of the country also. But really what we focus on is producing a high quality, consistent pulp for our customers that provides them with significant sustainability metrics as it relates to their downstream products. when we work with our farmers, obviously that's the critical cog in the wheel. That's our background. That's where we come from. And that's been a kind of a core driver of what we do. And it's how we work with our farmers. So typically, if you were an individual grower or farmer with us, we would provide you with a multi-year fixed price contract. So for the perennials like switchgrass and miscanthus, that's typically a minimum of a 5-year purchase agreement at set pricing. The farmer does the management under our management guidelines, but they actually do the work on the farm, planting the right varieties, managing and harvesting that material. They package that according to our guidelines, and then we bring that in on a set schedule from the farm. Obviously, because we're dealing with agricultural materials, they're being harvested during a defined window of the year. So good storage is always important to make sure that we have that year-round delivery schedule coming into the plant. We are big believers in distributed storage. We don't bring all of our material to centralized storage yards and aggregate a significant amount of material in one footprint. We just have seen some significant issues from a risk perspective in the past on that. And so we do all of our storage on farm. We do compensate the farmers for that storage, so they get an additional payment premium based on every 30 days that it's stored on the farm to compensate them for those efforts. We really focus, though, on recruiting acreage that is typically not actively used for other crops. If they're growing corn or soybeans today and they're earning a good return on that land, that's not what we want them to replace. We want to go on typically what I would classify as underutilized land that's not producing a good return. And the way we really talk to our growers about that is we want to be additive to the operation. They shouldn't have to be replacing anything that they currently already do. They're just adding a new revenue line on a piece of ground that wasn't producing revenue before. And in our particular part of the United States, that land is more common than you would think. We're not in the grain belt. We don't have the highest productivity soils, although we do have some good ones. Generally, every farm has a number of acres that aren't producing a good return for a variety of reasons. And that's typically where our crops fit. Using these perennial crops, particularly switchgrass, does tie us into the U.S. Department of Agriculture in some of the incentive programs they have around conservation, reduced tillage, reduced erosion through different programs at the federal level. And that certainly helps a lot of our growers. But we really focus on building those relationships with growers. We have some growers that we've been working with now for about 12 years under individual growing contracts who are continuing forward. And we really fundamentally believe that those long-term relationships will be what drives the bioeconomy forward, regardless of the products that you're making or selling. So just to kind of give you an example of what we're producing, that's an example of switchgrass fiber there as it comes out of a screw press in our process. We typically press it into sheets when we sell it, but that gives you an idea of what the raw fiber looks like. We produce a very high grade of fiber here. It's very similar to hardwood fiber, if you're familiar with that, in terms of characteristics and performance. It's a relatively short fiber, so a little bit less than a millimeter, but we have the similar tensile strength and other properties of a hardwood fiber. And that's, even though we're not competing against wood head to head, because that's not the right thing to do, it gives our market partners an idea of how this fiber performs in a variety of products. But we do really focus on meeting those strength performance requirements that they see in the market today, because it doesn't do us any good if we produce a fiber that's lower quality than what's being used today. We've had excellent success in paper towel, toilet and facial tissue, box board, molded fiber products. We've used our fiber in a variety of applications, and it's gone quite well. We've had very, very good success from the product standpoint. When we focus on our food service products, so that's actually a miscanthus plate there that you see in the picture with spaghetti on it. We mold those here in-house. And so we focus on being fully compostable. So what that means is that we meet the ASTM spec for compostability, that it will compost and degrade within 90 days in a commercial composting application. But what we really focus on in addition to that is consumer performance. Really what this essentially boils down to is when you put your hot spaghetti or your hot lasagna or something else in one of our products, it has to hold out in terms of not letting grease, water, or oil soak through that product while you're using it. And so we can meet or exceed all of the industry standards today as it relates to those performance requirements. And these molded fiber products are where we're seeing significant market gain, because today about 90% of molded fiber products that are in use in the US are coming from Asia or India. And so with the supply chain disruption that we've seen over the last year and a half due to the pandemic, that doesn't show any signs of getting better here anytime soon, domestic production of these materials in North America is a huge selling point to a lot of our customers. It's just a simpler supply chain that also comes with significant sustainability gains as it relates to the crops and the process that we use to make the products. And I do want to share with you just a little bit of sustainability information here as it relates to the process. So we have a good handle on the feedstock sustainability, and that's really not what this chart focuses on. We have good life cycle analysis on our feedstocks, and obviously there are significant benefits from a greenhouse gas standpoint, soil erosion, wildlife habitat, and those sorts of things. What I want to characterize here with this chart are, in the colored bars, that is the environmental impact of our pulping process. So if you take our fiber production process from the time we start grinding a bale to the time finished goods come out the back door, that's what we focus on here to compare it to the other sources of fiber in the marketplace. So I'm going to start with the middle bars there. Those are the blue bars. Those represent our energy consumption in terms of millions of BTUs per ton of fiber produced. So these are all apples to apples. What you can see is wood pulp typically requires more energy than other sources of fiber. So they're using about 11 million BTUs per ton of fiber produced. Our proprietary process in comparison uses less than half that. We're at about 4 million BTUs per ton. And you can see, comparing those to bagasse and bamboo produced in Asia, as well as the energy required to produce de-inked recycled fiber as well, we compare very, very favorably there. What that translates into then are the orange bars on the left, which represents greenhouse gas emissions. And it's represented there in tons of CO2 equivalent emitted per ton of fiber produced. And obviously that ties directly to your energy consumption, because that's the key driver of CO2 emissions. So you can see there that typically bagasse and bamboo pulp require or emit more tons of CO2 per ton of fiber than other sources. Wood is at about 1.75 tons of CO2, where our process is only about a quarter of a ton of CO2 equivalent. And while those bars don't align directly with the blue bars, the other important overlay there is it's really driven by the source of energy. So as an example, where Genera's facility sits here in Eastern Tennessee, about 55% of the energy we consume in our plant is derived from renewable or non-carbon intensive sources. So that's from hydro, wind, solar, and nuclear. The other 45% typically come from coal or natural gas. So that gives us some impact. That's why you see bagasse and bamboo in Asia emitting significantly higher CO2, because it's a little less regulated, more coal driven, and that sort of thing. The point, though, is our proprietary process is much, much less intensive from a CO2 standpoint. And then the bars on the right represent water consumption in terms of thousands of gallons of water per ton of fiber produced. Our facility uses just under 1,000 gallons of water per ton of fiber, and you can kind of see the averages there. Most people don't realize how water intensive wood craft pulping is. On average, it's about 14,000 gallons of water per ton of fiber produced. A newer mill might be down in the 8,000 range. An older mill might be in the 20,000 range. So that water intensity is quite important. All that said, these improved sustainability metrics from the source of the fiber really provides a significant benefit to our customers. Our customers are often distributors or major restaurant brands, major retailing brands, and they're really looking for those sustainability metrics to come along with the product so they can communicate to those customers to make sure that they're meeting their corporate goals, their customer-driven goals, and that sort of thing. And so what we do here, which is unique, is that we have domestic production of these products here in North America. We do them with very sustainable feedstocks. We convert them with a sustainable process, and that all ties together to give you a product that is usable to the consumer with a very small environmental footprint. And that's really what we focus on here. So to wrap up, I just want to show you a picture of our facility here in Tennessee to show you that it's real and that there are products being made every day, feedstock being consumed every day. So this is our facility. We have about 170,000 square feet under roof. And are looking already at expanding some of our production capacity here, specifically as it relates to some of the thermoform product goods, but also in our pulping line as well. So it's a pretty exciting time. It was a challenge to build our facility through the COVID pandemic. We started in mid-2019 on construction and wrapped that up in December of 2020 and brought our facility online in January of this year. And that was fairly challenging. But we're here and we're making good products out of sustainable feedstocks and are excited about where the industry will go from here. And so with that, I'll wrap up and happy to take any questions or here or at the end.
Great, fantastic, Sam. I really enjoy your presentation. I'm sure also participants they really enjoy the information you shared with us today. And indeed, Genera has been the pioneer in terms of development and deployment of agriculture biomass value chain. So I'm very happy that actually, Sam, you are making progress in Tennessee. I think we have time for one question, and I'd like to ask a question about this maintaining the soil carbon when you actually grow miscanthus. So do you have any guidelines, and are you monitoring the soil carbon on participating farms?
Yes, we have. And probably to be quite honest, Travis may have more data on miscanthus specifically from a carbon standpoint, but from a switchgrass standpoint as well. We have done active soil carbon monitoring over multiple years on our farms as we harvest our biomass. And quite honestly, we've seen increases in soil carbon while harvesting a significant amount of the biomass off of the land. So both with miscanthus and switchgrass, we harvest in the winter after the plant's gone dormant. And so what that actually allows us to achieve is a little bit of nutrient sequestration back down into the root system. But also as that material dries and ages in the field, we typically drop a lot of the leaf matter back onto the soil. And so through our regular monitoring, we've seen significant increases in soil organic carbon, both from leaf matter falling onto the soil and decaying, but also from some of the root structure changes deeper into the soil. We've done some deep soil sampling as well. So we've really seen some good effects there without significantly limiting biomass harvest. We have set cutting heights that we require our farmers to cut at. So typically those are about 8 to 10 inches above ground. So we do leave a little bit of stubble there. But beyond that, we try to harvest a significant amount of the biomass that's above that. And with that said, we still see increases in soil organic carbon compared to the prior use or to other fields and other crops and other applications.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sam. So I think we have to move on to the next presentation. Again, thank you, Sam. And I guess we have to go from Tennessee to North Carolina. The next speaker is actually joining us from North Carolina. Travis Hedrick, he is a Chief Operating Officer at Agrotech. It's an agriculture company focused on sustainable solutions for the emerging bioeconomy. Agrotech is based in, I guess they recently, Travis, you moved from Greensboro to High Point, right? So I'm assuming you are going to mention that. So the company actually, they have been expanding their operation from North Carolina, and now they actually have operation in several states in the US. And they are focusing again on different markets: livestock production, bioenergy, bioproduct, and erosion control. And I know Travis for probably, 8-9 years. And I know that he loves his gigantic miscanthus. So please take it away.
Thank you, Mahmoud. Let me make sure I can share my screen here. Okay. All right, thank you all. It's good to be with you today. I'd like to thank Mahmoud and the Biomass Canadian Cluster for hosting this webinar. It's always good to get a chance to talk about miscanthus. And today I'll be focused in on scaling giant miscanthus production and various uses here in the US. So as Mahmoud mentioned earlier, Agrotech, we are a agricultural company based here in North Carolina. We're focused on production and technology to provide our customers with environmental solutions. Miscanthus, as Andreas spoke about earlier, provides many benefits from a sustainability perspective. Some of the highlights is it's a perennial grass that can last 20 plus years of production. It requires minimal nutrients, water, herbicide, also creates local jobs for farmers, another diverse crop in our production areas. From an environmental standpoint, we see improvements in carbon sequestration, also water quality and soil quality enhancements from the aspect of nutrient reduction, soil loss. And then also from an economic perspective, we can provide our customers with long-term contracts by growing the crop specifically for their use. And the amount of fiber that is produced also leads to advantages in cost and also composition. So we know the plant's a great plant. Obviously, it's a new crop to the U.S. So we get asked often, what's the holdup? What's driving commercial success? So we think about these two processes equally. One, the challenge is establishment at scale, and two, markets. And they kind of go together. A lot of markets that are out there today are large scale. And so when we talk about supply, they're looking for a large quantity that then takes scaling the crop into light there. So we try to solve these problems through our technology. We developed a lifter, a processor, and a planter for establishing Miscanthus, as well as a pipeline of new Miscanthus hybrids that we'll bring to market in the future. This technology has allowed us to plant 6,500 acres across the U.S. We're now in 10 states, including North Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi, Maryland, Oklahoma, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Virginia, and Wisconsin. We also have the largest Miscanthus nursery farms in the U.S. So all our nursery farms are certified, and we provide certified seed to our planting locations. We have the ability to plant tens of thousands of acres with our nursery farms, which is key for scaling large-scale projects. In terms of the technology and what advantages we're seeing in the field, our planting system allows us to increase our plant population. Early on, when we started with Miscanthus production, we used carousel planters or transplanters. We also tested a planter that was developed in Europe on some of our production fields. And what we noticed early on in our development was that the establishment quality and plant population were lacking. So we developed our AccuPlanter in partnership with a equipment manufacturer. And we set this planter up to provide the ability to plant precise planting locations in the row, as well as row width. So this graphic depicts our early stages of planting with a carousel planter, where we planted one rhizome every 36 inches apart in the rows. And that plant population was around 4,800 plants per acre. Our new AccuYield system, we've been able to increase that population to 24 by 24 inch spacing. And we now drop 4 rhizomes per plant location, which gives us a target plants per acre of 10,890. This is translated to some immediate improvements. Our first year yields have averaged around 3 tons. And it's also translated to 90% of reaching our plant population targets. Also, what we see when we increase the amount of rhizomes being planted in early yield, we also see that translate into reduced cost per ton from a herbicide weed management perspective, as well as a first and second year harvest perspective. This is a great graphic to show the differences from early years to where we are today. This picture on the left was a farm we planted back in 2010 in Georgia. We used a carousel planter, and again, we planted on the 36 by 36 inch spacing. Our target there was 4,800 plants per acre. And a year later, we went out and surveyed the field, and as you can see with the aerial there, we only had about 40% establishment. The picture on the right-hand side here is a picture from a new farm that was planted in 2013 with the AccuYield system. At that time, we were doing lots of planting space trials. So this particular farm was planted on 18 by 26 inch spacing. Our target was 13,000 plants per acre, and we achieved 11. So it was a 96% establishment percentage there. And obviously with the aerials there, you can see the noticeable difference in first year stand quality. So, once the scaling process and technology was developed to bring Miscanthus to market, the next step for us was developing uses for it. A lot of customers early on in the biofuel space had not yet developed those markets. So we took the lead on finding markets that were here today that Miscanthus would have a good fit in. To do that, it takes partners. It's something that we pride our company on, working with others. As we develop a product, we use testing through universities or companies to bring that product to market. We also work with manufacturing partners who will contract to manufacture the products. And then we also like to integrate the local farming community in from a supply chain perspective. So we work with the local community to harvest, store, transport the crop to the end markets. And then we also work with farmers if particular project areas, whether it be in a new location for us, we work with local farmers to grow the crop for that particular market. So a few markets that we've been building on. Our biggest market is the commercial poultry bedding market. We've established partners with companies like Tyson Foods, Butterball, Prestige Farms, Sanderson Farms. This market is roughly a 250,000 acre, 2.9 million ton market annually. My graphic on the far right there depicts, the blue dots depict the broiler locations or chicken locations across the US. The orange dots here are focused on turkey. And the red circles are where we currently have production today. So you'll see a lot of our production areas correspond with poultry production. For a poultry house, average size poultry house, we're using 20 tons of Miscanthus annually. For a turkey house, 84 tons annually. So it's quite a large market there. We're also seeing some trends in that market. It continues to grow annually about 10 to 12% with growing population. Also, consumers are pushing for more food safety. So from a salmonella perspective, or a lot of production has moved to antibiotic free. That's driven the use of bedding to be changed out more often, or high quality bedding to be used. So that continues to be a trend in the market. Also new oversight on animal welfare, whether it be lesions to chicken paws or just the overall health of the animal from an ammonia perspective. This has driven companies to change some of their practices. Another driver in this market is the environmental. As Sam mentioned with his products, a lot of our customers are driven to reduce their carbon footprint, promote nutrient runoff reduction, and Miscanthus is a product that can align with that initiative and provide those benefits. Another market that kind of coincides with our bedding market has been the vegetative buffer market. It's something over the last few years we've continued to increase market share in that space. It aligns very well with the poultry industry. We do planting for the hog industry as well. But vegetative buffers have always been known for evergreens, planting near houses to reduce emissions. Miscanthus has a really good fit for that, with being a crop that not only provides significant height and cover, but also withstands some of those emissions coming from those houses. I like to show this graphic here, how it combines well with our poultry operation. This is a farm in Maryland where we planted the perimeter for animal bedding, but it also acts as a nice buffer for the farm as well. Outside of commercial poultry bedding, we also have a retail product, goes in for horse bedding or small animal bedding. It's a 2 cubic foot compressed bag that we have been introducing to retail, which is a great alternative for equestrian operations that are looking for all natural product that's different than wood or traditional wheat straw. Another retail product that we've been developing and bringing to market is our Garden Gold brand for the lawn and garden market. We sell this in various retail locations. What we're finding is the Miscanthus is a good, clean packaged product compared to a bale of wheat straw. So we've been increasing that demand for that product over the last couple of years, and we think there's a lot of potential here to grow this market. Also with that, our mulch is OMRI and organically certified. So that's something that garden folks are becoming more and more aware of and interested in. Biofuels, obviously I wanted to touch on biofuels. We continue to do a lot of work in this space. We, for years now, have been in partnerships with liquid fuel companies, thermal companies. We're now doing a lot of work in the biogas space. So it is a market that we continue to move forward. I wanted to highlight one project that we've been involved in for several years now. It's a partnership with the University of Iowa. There we've planted 1,250 acres thus far that's being used for thermal heat to achieve the university's goal of zero coal by 2025. That's been a great partnership to introduce Miscanthus into Iowa, the Farm Belt. So I had a lot of skeptical farmers originally, asking a lot of questions why Miscanthus was coming into the Corn Belt. But today, most of those folks have seen the progress of the project and have found that Miscanthus can provide a good fit even in corn country. We also have products in the erosion control space. We have developed sediment retention devices like silt socks and wattles. We also sell bales for cover, which has been a nice secondary product from our harvesting process. I think Sam brought up cutting heights. What we find is that by cutting for our poultry bedding business, we leave a lot of stubble on the field that markets like straw bedding for erosion control would have a great fit for. So that's a market that's been continuing to grow for us. Also, we've done some work with hydromulches and non-woven blankets where Miscanthus has been processed and integrated into straw blankets in combination with wheat straw. I think this is a big market potential for Miscanthus. Obviously, with the push for the infrastructure here in the U.S., I think that the erosion control market is a increased opportunity for miscanthus and switchgrass. And then finally, I just wanted to kind of highlight some other products that we are working on in partnership with others. Again, we try to develop these markets out so we have the opportunity to plant more commercial acres of miscanthus. We've got research and development work going on in planting pots, substrate media for the horticulture market. For the pet care market, we have a project where we're looking at all natural cat litter. And then building materials, I think Andreas mentioned the opportunities there. We have been doing work around insulation, fiberboard, and flooring, as well as some work with as an additive for lightweight concrete. And then in combination with that, I think there's several other biomaterials that miscanthus has a potentially a great fit for, but the products we're most focused on today are around the bioplastic, food packaging, biochar, and ingredients. So I'll kind of leave it there and look forward to hearing more from the group and answering any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you very much, Travis. Thank you. It was a really great presentation. And of course, Travis did not have time to share some of the progress his company has made in terms of harvesting and logistics. I know that Travis has been trying different pathways using like baling equipment, using the chopping equipment. So hopefully in the future webinars, we can actually have Travis to talk about the progress actually his company has been made in terms of even development of the miscanthus logistics and supply chain. So Travis, I guess we have time for one question, and we have mentioned different market, and we have one question about biogas. You mentioned that you are actually looking into the use of miscanthus for biogas application. So does miscanthus have to be pre-treated before digestion?
Yeah, I think to answer that, there's several different technologies out there. I know there's technologies focused on pre-processing miscanthus into the sugars and then taking that to biogas. Also, one of the interesting concepts that we've been looking at is a full circle with our poultry bedding business, taking the bedding once used as for bedding, then turned to litter, then the litter being used in a biogas plant. So I think there's a lot of different opportunities. It just depends on the technology type.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Travis. So I think we have about 15 minutes. I don't think we are going to get to any panel discussion, but I see that actually Andreas and also Sam is trying to answer some of the question. But I should let you know that we are going to collect all of the unanswered questions at the end of the webinars. And I'm trying to actually, I will contact the presenters to answer this question offline. And then we are going to post this question on the website. So in case if you do not have time to address all of the question, we try our best to actually post all of the question and also their answer on the website. So thank you, Travis. So we move to the last presentation. We move back to Canada. We have a presenter from Canada, Roger Sampson. He's an agricultural plant scientist and the executive director of Resource Efficient Agriculture Production Canada. In 1991, he began working to develop native perennial warm season grasses as dedicated biomass crops. He was involved in some of the first efforts in North America to develop the crops for biofiber and thermal application in the 1990s. His main focus since 2006 has been domesticating these grasses through plant breeding to make them profoundly simple to grow, widely adapted, and with improved biomass yield and quality. Okay, thanks, Roger, for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Mahmoud. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
How's that?
Yes, yeah, I can see that.
Sorry.
Roger, if you don't mind, I can share the screen on your behalf and I can advance
Okay,
the
go ahead.
slide.
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to do that. Okay, go ahead, Sam. Roger, sorry.
Thanks, Mahmoud. Yeah, just to bring it all back to McGill University, where Biomass Canada is based. Actually, REAP Canada started in 1986 amongst a bunch of graduate students at the university. And at the time, we didn't know what we wanted to call the organization. The first name we came up with was the Regenerative Agriculture Association of Canada. So 35 years later, there's a lot of interest in regenerative agriculture. And we weren't sure if we'd call it RAC or if we'd call it REAP. And in the end, we decided with REAP because it had quite a nice catchy name. So resource efficient agricultural production really started with doing regenerative ag work, and then everybody got on the sustainable agriculture bandwagon. So we decided that we would focus on these native perennial grasses in about 1991, and we started our breeding program right away because we realized that there was a real problem with these grasses. They were not easy to grow. Next. So in 1992, we developed these improved biomass cultivars of switchgrass and big bluestem. We started that development work. We visited most of the plant breeding programs and the plant material centers in the US, and we got the best materials we could find at the time. And we started our breeding work, and we found it really challenging and quite labor intensive. And the markets were very slow to develop. The whole pulp and paper market didn't take off in the mid 1990s. The cellulosic ethanol market didn't take off. So we started some breeding cycles. We did some population development, and then we really refocused in about 2006 to really focus on it in a bigger way when we saw that this biomass economy thing was going to become real. And we focused on adapting these grasses to the best, not the best lands, but to reduce land competition, we focused on less than best lands, or some people would call more marginal land. And what the farmers told us was easier to grow and faster to establish, higher yielding. And we saw that we needed to widen the maturity range to increase the yield of these upland switchgrass types. So later maturity. And then we tried to introduce higher yielding and lower maturity. Next. So this was the real problem we saw was when we started is in the early 1990s is that these fields, for lack of a better term, were just filthy. You know, we had a lot of annual grasses in our fields, a lot of weeds, and you had to look for the switchgrass on certain fields. And we had large acreages. We were putting in like up to 500 acres with Iogen Corporation. So it was really, we had a lesson that these grasses were not field crops, and then we needed to domesticate these grasses. Next. And so what we did is we looked through the literature, how best to improve these grasses so that they would be easy to grow and establish quite quickly. What made the most sense was to shorten the breeding cycles to 1 year and to select for single tiller emergence. So some breeding programs in the southern US were using annual breeding cycles for, I think, Bahia grass. We thought that made sense. We selected on an annual basis repetitively, and some of our populations have been through eight and nine breeding cycles. Next. So if you look at the far left, that photo, you'll see that's an original population of Caven rock that we harvested in fall 2006, made a selection on the farm on a 15-acre field, and then we put it through our breeding process. And you can see like the center picture, that's 10 years later. We've got a very organized canopy, and it's starting to look like a field crop. And that's what the material looks like when it's mature on the right. And it's basically, we looked at miscanthus, we looked at lowland switchgrass, and we said a lot of good traits in those plants for photosynthesis. We just need to integrate those into upland switchgrass. We considered upland switchgrass the winner in the central and northern US and Canada because of the simplicity of cultivation. Very large seed, easy to grow, more flexible in terms of cutting time, and more of a multi-purpose crop, so that if you did do like Andreas said and go to fractionation technologies, that crop could be used for livestock feed and for biofiber. Next. So this is our new ideotype, and really we developed this ideotype in about 2014. We saw that these plants that were the winners in our breeding nurseries had wider leaves, they were erect, they really looked like lowland switchgrass, the blue-green with the glaucous bloom and reduced tillers. So if you would see a lowland switchgrass and you would see our upland switchgrass, you'd really have a hard time if you really weren't a switchgrass expert to differentiate them. Next. And so we've done these performance trials across Quebec in Ontario. We started in Quebec and Ontario with our performance trials, and we've seen really like dramatic progress in terms of ease of establishment and increased biomass yield. And if you put them on productive soils, you can really get some impressive quantities of biomass in the fall. And we've done it all through intensive morphological selection. You know, the people that are doing you know, more advanced breeding technologies really aren't making any faster progress than with traditional methods. And in fact, we're actually scaling up our materials faster than other breeding programs because these plants are easy to select. They've never been, they're wild plants. And so we can make a lot of progress quite easily using traditional breeding methods and just advancing those breeding methodologies and making them better. Next. And so what we decided was that rather than like just have one variety like Caven Rock that everybody grows in Eastern Canada and a lot of the Northeastern US, we would try to differentiate the grasses so we can have different harvest periods and grasses that are adapted to different ecological zones in North America. So these low maturity materials like the Blue Jacket and Tecumseh, they're very well adapted to the Northern Great Plains in Minnesota. And Sundance would be, it's a cross between a Great Plains material and a Great Lakes region material. And then we have our Chippewa and Big Rock that are doing exceptionally well in the Great Lakes region. And so we have about a 25-day maturity difference on these materials. And it allows us to do both fall harvesting, and in Canada, we do this technique of fall mowing and spring baling. So we overwinter the material. Next, please. And we have now our materials on 5 sites in the US, and I believe we're up to 9 sites in Canada where we're doing performance trials. And this is actually a site in Illinois, in Champaign, Illinois. And the blue-green materials are 2 of our selections, and the blue materials are lowland selections. But you can see that really they're looking a lot like lowlands, and they're performing very well. They would be shorter season, but what we're aiming for now in many regions is to do like September harvest, so we can get the material out and in use earlier. Go ahead. And there's a profound simplicity to growing these grasses. We can use conventional field crop seeding equipment and seed actually both big bluestem and switchgrass. So we've been seeding big bluestem with units like this, air seeders, and you can seed about 18 acres an hour. You can just scale it up so easily. We're up to about 700 to 750 acres in seed production of our improved materials in North America now, which should be able to produce about 150,000 pounds a year by 2022. So we found that these new varieties that are excellent for just an excellent or exceptional establishment, combined with no-till seeding, which is you know really improves annual grass control. We're getting quite fast field establishment. Next slide, please. So here are our growers. We actually have 12 growers, and our biggest grower in the US would be Ernst Conservation Seed, who is really the pioneer in native grass development in North America. One of the biggest players in the world, really, in native grasses. And we're working with our partners, and we're all learning together how to grow these grasses easier and cheaper. And our cost of production on these grasses is quite low, especially if we go on less than best farmland. And we're getting about 2 tons per acre, and we don't even have in the first year. And we still have further genetic progress that we're working on. So we found that just the advances we've made in agronomy and genetics have really turned this from a native grass into a field crop. Next, please. So upland switchgrass, this is mid-July at a farm in Ontario, and this crop is really doing well. And there's no herbicides on this crop. There's no phosphorus and potassium. There would be about normally we put on about 60 pounds of nitrogen on the crop. So we've got a regenerative crop. This crop can restore soil carbon and produce sustainable biomass, and it can do it for however long we want, but probably about 5 years is what we're looking for as a maximum rotation cycle on more productive land, and perhaps 6 to 7 on less than best land. Next, please. And so this would be the system that we developed in Ontario, where we mow the material in the fall. And then if you look in the bottom right corner, you'll see that we have it in windrows over winter. It's a frozen state in Ontario in most of the winter, and in Quebec. So we can use this technology. This wouldn't be for like mid latitudes in the US, but it's a specific system that we developed that optimized biomass quality, both for the pulp and paper sector and for the thermal combustion sector, where we're leaching out the potassium. Next, please. So we're working harder on fall harvesting systems. And what we've done is we've advanced the maturity and on some of our switch grasses to bring in high yield and early maturity. And you can see on the slope, that material is starting to turn yellow. So that material is starting to reach physiological maturity. The seed would be in a soft dough to a hard dough stage. And we can cut it at that point, and it won't winter kill, and it won't regrow in the fall. And so that point in Ontario would be about the 3rd week of September. Next, please. So this is an example of our fall harvesting system on a high yield new variety. This is at the farm of Don Knott, quite a famous farmer in Ontario. And he cut it September 17th last year, and he baled it 4 days later. Next, please. So he would rake it on the morning of baling, and then put it in the bales. Next, please. And he got 6 tons per acre. So, this is quite impressive that we're able to, on less than best farmland, do fall harvesting with upland switchgrass and pull off 6 tons per acre. And we have improved genetics beyond this material that was harvested in this field. Next slide, please. So our real achievements have been that it's really been a 30-year effort to work on these native grasses, and we consider now that we've turned them into field crops, and that we've developed commercial partnerships with some of the leading players in North America on native grasses and leading farmers in Canada, and we've started export sales to the US and to Europe. And these were our first shipments going into Europe with a French company called Seed Energies, and they've been a pioneer in France in the development of switchgrass. So we're very excited that that the agronomy and the plant material improvement is happening in a bigger way, and there are a lot of opportunities in the agri-food and the bioeconomy, and we need to focus on those. Next, please. So the sector overall needs to recognize that competition for land is severe. With high commodity prices, we can do it with seed growers, we can go on the best land. But for commercial biomass production, we've really got to focus on less than best lands to optimize the product cost. Carbon offset programs for growers will help. And we really need to focus on more market development of emerging opportunities, both in the agri-food sector and the bioeconomy. I could share with some people some of the materials that we've developed in the agri-food sector. We're currently working with the University of Guelph on a project around feeding switchgrass for dry cow feed and for physically effective fiber. We've done some work with partners around straw utilization for dairy animals. And then in the bioeconomy, there's just all kinds of different products we've worked on. In fact, we actually worked on the world's first cat litter made from switchgrass. So really there's need for continued efforts on the breeding and performance trials and on the market development, and to provide assistance programs for farmers, especially around carbon offset. Next, please. And I just finally want to thank all our research partners. In particular, I'd like to thank Ernst Conservation Seeds. I've had a personal relationship with Calvin Ernst since 1989, and certainly he's been an inspiration in terms of developing this whole native grass area. And we work closely with the Ontario Biomass Producers Cooperative in Ontario, and we have close partnerships with many universities in Canada, including McGill University, Guelph University, and more recently Sherbrooke University. In fact, we have materials with Nova Scotia Agriculture College as well. They're testing our new materials through Biomass Canada. And then more recently, we've developed our partnerships further with the US universities. We have performance trials with University of Nebraska, Illinois, Iowa, and South Dakota State University. And here in Quebec, our biggest research partner is Serum, who's coordinating warm season grass trials on five sites in Quebec. And finally, I'd like to thank Agriculture Canada and Bioindustrial Innovation Canada, who are funding our breeding efforts through the ag science programs that Agriculture Canada is funding across Canada. Thanks very much. If you have any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Roger. It's great to see that we are also making a good progress in Canada, especially in Ontario and also Quebec. So, Roger, do you see any opportunity to grow miscanthus and switchgrass in Canadian prairies?
Well, I think miscanthus is really a challenging crop in Canada to grow. Like we had a frost in late May this year, and it fried the miscanthus. It really suffered badly, and the switchgrass is more cold tolerant, more frost tolerant rather. So miscanthus has a great reputation that it grows well in cool climates, but it doesn't take a spring frost. So it's so much simpler to work with native grasses in North America and look at miscanthus as a model in terms of solar energy capture, integrate those traits into native grasses. And we really have them there. So in Ontario, for example, there's miscanthus growers and switchgrass growers. Switchgrass production is expanding. Miscanthus production really isn't expanding because there hasn't been as many markets developed for the miscanthus. It's basically a biomass only market, whereas the switchgrass has agri-food markets combined with bioeconomy markets. But primarily what we're dealing with is agri-food markets at present, and that's our anchor. Those are our anchor markets, and the other bioindustrial markets will evolve. And that's why I didn't really speak very much about big blue stem, is that we have to have the markets before we can scale up these genetics that we're developing. We can't have a situation where farmers are planting something like, for example, fiber flax here in Quebec, and then the plant goes bankrupt and they've got no alternative use for it. With switchgrass, we have a diverse market application.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. You already actually passed 10 minutes from the time we were supposed to have the webinar, which is great. We see that participants are staying with us, and also we get questions. Before close the session, I just want to ask one question from all of the panelists, like Travis, Sam, Andreas, and Roger. I'd like to get your thought on We see that we are seeing a growing market in carbon credits. We see that some of the voluntary program in US, in Europe. Do you think we have enough data across the value chain for miscanthus and switchgrass to help farmers to make additional income from carbon credits? Do you have any thought on that? Andres, do you want to go first?
If you want me,
Yeah.
I can try. Yeah, you know, from a scientific point of view, it's a bit complicated question because the soil organic carbon formation is highly site dependent. So if you start with a site where you have a high soil organic carbon content already before you establish a crop like switchgrass or miscanthus, you cannot gain as much as you start from very depleted soil. So that makes it rather complicated. And on the other hand, it's also, you know, this soil organic carbon needs to stay there for minimum 100 years, which means you have to keep either the crop for 100 years, or you have to make sure if you remove the crop after 20 or 30 years, that you don't release the carbon from the soil again anymore, because otherwise you would release the CO2 again into the atmosphere. So this is rather difficult to make sure about that. But for sure, there's increasing interest, and I believe there will be a market developing it for it. I think there is already some early market developing, which is outside the, let's say, the CO2 certificate market in Europe, for example.
Sam?
So I think there's some great opportunity, and we're starting to see some movement, particularly on some of the row crops here in the US. So Indigo Ag and some similar groups like that are really focused on that carbon market, because I think the core thing to really get our growers to focus on it is to show the value to them. You know, who are the people buying these carbon credits, and how is that going to work? And that's kind of what some of these groups are now starting to put together. Obviously, they're focused on row crops a lot today, just because that's where the sheer volume of acreage is, and looking at some applications there. But we've started some work with a couple of the groups to really focus on these native grasses and perennial crops like miscanthus, simply because obviously the carbon gain is so much higher there that the value per acre to the grower could be significantly higher. And so I think we're still a ways out from seeing a true strong commercial market there, but we're starting to see some of that progression occur, starting to move that direction. And again, that relates to, you know, the overall value proposition to the farmer to switch to a new feedstock, to grow switchgrass for the first time, or to grow miscanthus, because, you know, it does differentiate these crops in that they don't get their initial return within, you know, 180 days. It's a longer term process to get switchgrass and miscanthus up to full yield, and to get your investment back. And while we can show, you know, a 5-year, 10-year return all the time, you're still being compared to some of the annual crops that the farm operations are used to seeing. So as you overlay these value propositions like carbon sequestration and some of the other benefits that are there, as we can build those markets, it will certainly help, I think, recruit growers into the space, reduce risk, and those kinds of things.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sam. Travis?
Yeah, I think everybody covered that really well. But to Sam's point, I think he had a really nice slide in his presentation that showed those benefits that are occurring from his pulp versus other pulps that are on the market, lower energy, carbon sequestration, so forth. And I think that's where we see at Agrotech, our customers value that carbon reduction. So we use tools like Comet Farm, which was developed by USDA to calculate how much carbon is occurring in our different locations. And then we use that in our product pitch to our partners. And what I'm seeing is, you know, companies are willing to pay more for products that are more sustainable. And that's a way that value can translate back to the farmer.
Thank you, Travis. Roger?
Well, we did actually, REAP Canada and McGill University did one of the very first studies in North America on carbon offset from switchgrass compared to field crops, and that was published in the late 1990s. And we also see that there's N2O avoidance. So if you have nitrogen pollution from corn, like if you have 150 or 200 kilos of nitrogen per hectare going out there, you've got major nitrogen pollution, N2O pollution. Switchgrass, you're putting out, let's say 60 kilos per hectare. You've got a lot less nitrogen being lost from the system. So you actually have a saleable offset that you don't have to be concerned about not that being lost. It's there. And then in terms of the sustainability of the carbon offset, well, as long as the farmer can maintain, let's say 20% of the farm in these native grasses, well, then they should be able to maintain that offset as a robust offset for sale. And I think it's just a matter of giving farmers conservative credits and putting a price on it. And it's going to be a little incentive to help them out, but it's not going to be a primary driver in terms of their economic decision making. We do have some farmers that are getting payments for bird habitat, and we're seeing that on these switchgrass fields. We're seeing like the birds know it's a safe habitat for them, and they'll just re-nest there every year. And so that's quite encouraging, is to go out and see those nests and see the birds take off when you walk through the fields.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, we have seen Microsoft, we have seen Amazon, like Shopify, these big companies, they are actually looking for different pathways to reduce their carbon footprint. So definitely agriculture and dedicated biomass crop, they have a potential in that space to actually even encourage farmers to look into growing this type of crop. So again, thank you very much. I have actually a couple of more questions, but in the interest of time, we have to close the session. Thank you again very much, Roger, Andreas, Sam, Travis. As I was expecting, I knew that we are going to have a lot of good discussion and presentation. And also thanks to the participants. Again, I promise to get as much as possible from the panelists to answer the question we couldn't actually address today, but I know that they are very busy. So, but I do my best. And then we are going to post all of the question and answer on the website. Again, thank you very much. And I hope everyone to enjoy the rest of the day and hopefully see you in the next webinars. Thank you very much. Yeah, bye.
Bye-bye.